Well, on completion of the silver jubilee of years of CEERA, it brings nostalgic memories sitting here in my house after my superannuation, 6 months after that. How do I describe CEERA in about a sentence or so? Well, it's a tough ask, but let me make an effort. CEERA conveys several things. It's an educational endeavor, a research laboratory, a catalyst for action, a capacity enhancer for academic, activist, administrator, adjudicator, and even an entrepreneur. In short, everyone. A policy intervener, an information storehouse, a consultant, a finishing school, a policy intervener, a law drafter, a networker. I have actually listed 10 of those functions of CEERA and many, many more. Well, if I can elaborate a little bit, it can definitely include something like, as a center of excellence in a university system, a model for self-reliance, because for the very genesis of this institution and its growth and its current stature, the institution, instead of actually funding it or financing it, this center has been able to gather its own resources and be able to also contribute to the institution as well. And so a model for self-reliance and very great inclusivity. If you just look at the profile of the members of CEERA, right from 1997 till today, it has such a kind of a representation which is very wide. An alumni of the law school, a judge of a Supreme Court in a foreign country, Nepal, who was my student, and later who became my researcher, a couple of more alumni, both in the undergraduate program and the postgraduate program, a colleague who just gave up his lecturership in an institution just to join as a research assistant to me way back in 1999 or so, Professor CEERA-NLSIU, who now heads the organization. A couple of international internees who later became our researchers and also did doctoral work here. So it is such an inclusive place and a model for as to how an institution can start from scratch, just like National Law School, which began just a decade before CEERA came into existence with absolutely nothing, and then reaching the commanding heights and pinnacle of success as you are witness to now. All in the realm of environmental and natural resource management law. That is CEERA for you in brief. What was the journey of these 25 years of its existence? I must say it is sheer magic. And it's also like Ripley's Believe It or Not. Even today, when I recall those good old days, when the center was taking shape and develop over a period of time, I still get goose pimples. It's really fascinating. Let me explain. When I say that it is Ripley's Believe It or Not, CEERA is a vision. The acronym CEERA, C-E-E-R-A, the Center for Environmental Law, Education, Research and Advocacy, does not clearly reflect what it is. As it took birth in 1997, it did not have law as part of its description. In fact, much later, when somebody pointed it out to us, we somehow squeezed law between environmental and education part. So now what you have is not something what it was when it took its birth as Center for Environmental Education, Research and Advocacy. Second, it was not even a center of excellence in the official sense of the term. There was no formal announcement of a new center taking birth in official terms, either in the academic bodies or in the executive bodies of this university when it took shape and came into existence. In fact, there was no reference to this at all at the decision-making level of the university in the year 1997 when it came into existence, which is actually the usual formality observed for all centers. It began its life very unobtrusively as a project execution unit of one of those major projects of Government of India within the law school. In fact, if you just look into the records of our National Law School as to how a center takes shapes and comes into existence, this did not have the usual kind of a run-of-the-mill creation and existence and coming into existence. However, in all the correspondences and the convocation addresses right from 1997 and in our official records, much later, we are considered as a center of excellence, occupying a pride of place in the scheme of things in the university. That's why I said it's, please believe it or not, that's only the beginning. Let me continue. Actually, after a dozen years of existence of CEERA, one single center of excellence, both to rationalize the heavy load of work that it was called upon to bear, as I was mentioning about a dozen set of activities that CEERA is involved in, it was felt that we needed to really rationalize its working and create two other centers to work along with CEERA. And in 2009, we created what is called as the Commons Cell, with primary focus on developing Indian jurisprudence and environmental law. This was the year 2009. The third center of excellence came, described as the Environmental Law Clinic, primarily as a finishing school to make the students and professionals practice fit to secure, seek, and ensure environmental justice in various forms. And till around 2016, I was the only one who was actually managing the affairs of this, although officially I was in charge. I was very keen that since I would be retiring in another 5-6 years, I should be able to really prepare for the succession plan. And I had my colleague, Professor CEERA-NLSIU, and I requested him, and he was assisting me in every work of mine. And it was very necessary that he should take charge, but he was reluctant initially. And later, he was persuaded to head the center, CEERA, and I to manage the other center, the Common Cell, officially. So I was actually handling one center and he was handling two centers de jure, but de facto, it was Professor CEERA-NLSIU who was managing everything in the last 5 years. And so the succession plan was put into effect right from 2016 or 15, around that time. And the transition was a very smooth thing. And I must say that this center has gone from strength to strength, from something that was very humbly and having a very small reach, could reach the length and breadth of India, bringing in all law schools in its fold, in its variety of activities, all credit to Professor CEERA-NLSIU and the team. So now you have the convergence of the work of all the three centers in one center, CEERA. And that's why I say that CEERA is like a Ripley's Believe It or Not. The translation of this idea of CEERA into a reality, how did it happen? Did it come all of a sudden? No. This is indeed very fascinating account I can give you very quickly. Way back in 1991, our law school was the first institution in India to formally introduce environmental law in the undergraduate law curriculum, teaching the students of the basic degree in law. No other institution in India did do that. And this first batch of our students were taught by an American professor, Professor Armin Rosenkrantz, who was here in India earlier on a Fulbright fellowship and later took so much of interest in our environmental law. He actually, along with a professional by name Sham Diwan, was able to produce the first definitive work on environmental law in India, mainly drawn from the experiences of his teaching of 1 year in this law school, which even to this day, even after 3 decades of the launching of this law program in the curricula of the undergraduate syllabi, this up the only the major reference work on environmental law in India and has never ever been bettered by any other work till date. It was my privilege that I took over the teaching of environmental law from Armin Rosenkrantz. Of course, he had already gone when I came here, from the second batch onwards till I superannuated in this law school. I must say that my coming into teaching environmental law is another Ripley's Believe It or Not. I had no previous experience of having taught the subject at all, and nor I had either for my bachelor's degree or for my master's degree ever studied it. My experience was only the desire to explore something new, and here was an opportunity given to me to develop the curriculum and all other activities in relation to environmental law in this law school, almost just like on a platter, almost like a blank check, for me to fill things up and work on it. Sometime in 1995-96, I organized a major national workshop on displacement, resettlement, and rehabilitation, wherein the government officials, the activists, and also the World Bank participated in it, and they were thoroughly impressed by the way in which the law school had organized this program and conducted this activity. I was much later involved in preparing a draft bill on land acquisition, resettlement, and rehabilitation sometime in 1996, which had the approval of the government of India and also the World Bank long time back, but it never saw the light of the day. But that was one experience. Then in 1996, I think, sometime much later, around 1996, I had a golden opportunity of being invited to be among the 50 chosen environmental law professors of the Asia Pacific region to congregate in a place, Singapore, spend 1 full month in all over the globe, developing, working upon the curriculum on environmental law, action concerning environmental law, and developing the future directions of environmental law, education, research, advocacy, and policy by an organization called International Union for Conservation of Nature, IUCN for short. This was a great eye-opener, a great opportunity for me to really soak in the ambience of having about 50 teachers from all over the Asia Pacific region to work with me, and I work with them to do something on environmental law, which was still at a very nascent stage of evolution, both in India and elsewhere in the world. This was all the experience. Sometime in 1997, early 1997, the senior government officials in the Ministry of Environment and Forest, the secretary himself, and the World Bank representatives came down to our law school to have a discussion about the law school taking up a project on environmental law capacity building for the entire India. I must say, our law school was not the first choice. In fact, as you know, it was a huge project. In the 1997 estimate, it was 20 crore rupees worth project. Our law school's total turnover was not even 30-40 lakhs at that time. So you can as well imagine the scale of the activity. And normally when you have such a huge international project of the World Bank, you would have several bidders for that. Several international organizations bid for that project. And even within India, WWF, JNU, at least to my knowledge, and a couple of other organizations in India were very keen to take up this particular exercise. But the choice was on India. We never proposed, we never bid it. They came to law school and said that you should engage in this particular activity, carry out this particular activity for us for a period of 5 years and build the capacity of all. At the time of our negotiation with the government, there was nothing about who would be executing it, who would be coordinating it, who would be heading it within the law school. Law school would engage in that, that's all. In fact, if I can be a little bit autobiographical, I was not even the first choice. In fact, I was not even the choice. In fact, one of the colleagues of mine was asked by the then director, who later became the vice chancellor, to take up this particular assignment. And that colleague flatly declined by saying that I know nothing of environmental law and here is somebody who is teaching it, but I cannot take it up. And there was nothing done at that time. Maybe a few days later, one fine morning, the director himself came to my chamber and told me, Ramesh, this is a very prestigious project. I will be the principal investigator and you will be the coordinator of it. Now, you should be in charge of this particular activity. Without compromising on your regular work in the university, you execute it. I said, how do I go about it? Well, you need to have to plan. And you have to prepare an action plan, take it to the ministry, get its approval, and start work. Just like that. To cut a long story short, I prepared the draft of our action plan, and I just don't know how I got the approval. The Environment Ministry gave the approval. All that I did it in 1 day's exercise, very tentative schedule. And later, we organized the first meet on environmental capacity building program. I had no assistance at that time, just alone with a few colleagues assisting me in this work. And later, we recruited 3 researchers, an alumnus of our law school, a master degree student who was a judge in a high court in Nepal, who later registered for his PhD with us, and a third candidate, an environmental scientist, as our first batch of researchers to work with me. Programs after programs followed, 365 days of work, not even a single day's respite. And I must convey to you, it was such a wonderful exercise of 5 years. Time just flew. And the ministry on record conveyed that among the various projects executed by it, the law school, the CEERA, this motley unit of CEERA, was the one which stood at number 1 in delivering whatever it had promised and doing much more than what was assigned to it. Well, there has been no looking back after we launched that because we had no time to breathe even. And thanks to this wonderful young team who worked with me initially and later took up leadership roles in various places all over the world. It was a very fluid situation, and the only one who remained all through was Professor Sairam Bhatt till the completion of this project, after which he went out of the law school to teach elsewhere. And luckily for our fervent appeal, he came back to the law school. And as I had conveyed earlier, he took up the leadership in this. And you are seeing how wonderfully this mansion of CEERA is being built, developed, and evolved all these years. How do you see the future of CEERA? Given these trying times that we are in, where there is a constant thrust in favor of development at any cost, planned or unplanned, with little concern for environment, the role and the responsibility that CEERA needed to undertake will be much more than what it has been so far. After the Silver Jubilee, I'm quite sure that in addition to these set of activities that CEERA is undertaking and doing with great aplomb and accomplishment, as being an institution of excellence looked up on by so many institutions, organizations, and entities, including the governments of India and all the states in India, it will have a major role to play. As a major player, I would definitely visualize this to develop into an autonomous National Environmental Law Academy. National Environmental Law Academy, NELA, the acronym. In Kannada, NELA means Nela, land, or the resources. So this is what I wanted to develop into, having two dimensions, a national and then regional and international, and outreach. And just one of the activities that it can definitely, and it will be called upon to help the government of India would be to develop and engage in building the capacity in our negotiators, in the international fora, in the international diplomatic circles on matters touching upon environmental policy, law, and its implementation. This is a must. There is so much of lack in that in India, and the capacity in this area need to be built. If India is to be a major player, 75 years of our independence, as moving towards a century boldly as an independent nation, this is a must that should happen. I'm quite sure, under the able leadership of Professor Sairam, who has age on his side and a young team to back up, would be able to do this and many more things. Let me wish the center all the best in the coming decades and years to make a major impact on good environmental governance in India and elsewhere. Thank you.